Marcus Reyes pulled his leased Range Rover into the valet line outside a steakhouse in Scottsdale, Arizona. The valet smiled. The hostess smiled. The couple walking in behind him whispered to each other, wondering who he was. For a few seconds, Marcus was exactly who he wanted everyone to think he was. 3 hours later, sitting alone in his car in a Walgreens parking lot, he opened his banking app. He moved $400 from one credit card to another, just to keep a payment from bouncing. Then he drove to the grocery store and paid for milk and eggs with a card that was already almost maxed out. Nobody at that restaurant saw any of that. They only saw the car. That wasn't bad luck. It was the result of something millions of Americans quietly do every single day. They are not lying with words. They are lying with appearances. And the strange thing is, most of them don't even realize they're doing it. It starts small. A slightly nicer car than they can really afford. A vacation put on a card just this once. A dinner they can't quite say no to. And slowly, without ever making one dramatic decision, they build an entire life that looks successful from the outside and feels terrifying from the inside. This is a documentary about that gap. The gap between looking rich and being financially secure. Because once you understand how it happens, you start noticing it everywhere. In your neighbors, your coworkers, your social media feed, and sometimes uncomfortably, in yourself. Here's the first sign, and it's the most common one of all. The car in the driveway. Financial researchers have long pointed out something counterintuitive. Many people who drive expensive vehicles are not wealthy at all. They're leasing, financing at high interest, or stretching a loan out over 6 or 7 years just to keep the payment low enough to survive. Meanwhile, people who quietly built real wealth often drive something practical and paid off. Studies on millionaire households, most famously the research behind The Millionaire Next Door, found that a large share of actual high-net-worth Americans deliberately avoid new luxury cars because they understand something most people never stop to consider. A car is not an investment. It's a depreciating expense wearing a costume of success. The second sign is subtler. It's the person who always has to eat out, always has to order the good bottle, always insists on picking up the check. On the surface, it looks like generosity. Underneath, it's often something closer to fear. The fear of being seen as someone who can't afford it. Restaurant spending is one of the easiest ways to burn through money without ever noticing, because each individual charge feels small. It's not until the credit card statement arrives that the real number becomes impossible to ignore. But that's not the biggest mistake. What happens next is even more expensive. The third sign is what financial psychologists call lifestyle inflation. The habit of increasing spending every single time income increases. Someone gets a raise, and instead of saving the difference, they upgrade their apartment, their wardrobe, their phone plan, their everything. Their income goes up, but so does their spending at almost exactly the same pace. 5 years later, they're earning double what they used to, and they still have nothing saved. This is one of the quiet reasons so many high earners still feel financially stuck. It was never about how much they made. It was about how much of it they kept. The fourth sign is financing things that should never be financed. Clothing, phones, vacations, even everyday purchases, split into 4 easy payments that somehow never feel like real debt. Buy now, pay later services have made this easier than ever, letting people convince themselves that spreading a cost across weeks makes it smaller. It doesn't. It just hides the size of it. The fifth sign is the absence of an emergency fund. This one rarely shows up in conversation because nobody posts a photo of their savings account. But it's often the clearest divide between people who look financially stable and people who actually are. Someone can have designer everything and still be one car repair away from financial disaster. Financial experts consistently recommend keeping 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in accessible savings, not because it's exciting, but because it's the difference between a bad week and a bad year. There's another habit that quietly destroys wealth, and it has almost nothing to do with spending at all. The sixth sign is never talking honestly about money. In many American households, money is treated like a taboo subject, something you don't discuss with friends, family, or even a partner. This silence is dangerous because it means people rarely get honest feedback on their financial decisions. They compare houses and vacations, but never comparing savings rates or debt loads because nobody shows that part. The result is an entire culture quietly competing based on incomplete information, each person assuming everyone else has it figured out. The seventh sign is the habit of never investing. Not because people don't want to build wealth, but because spending money feels good right now, and investing feels like nothing is happening at all. Compound growth is invisible in the short term and enormous in the long term, and that mismatch is exactly why so many people skip it. A person who invests consistently, even modestly over decades, will often end up wealthier than someone earning far more who never starts. Time in the market has historically mattered more than timing the market, and the earlier someone begins, the less effort it actually takes. If you're enjoying documentaries that explain how money really works, not just how people talk about it, subscribe to John Explains Money. Every week we break down the psychology of wealth, investing, and financial decisions in plain English. Now, back to Marcus and the eighth sign, one that surprises almost everyone. It's not the spending itself that traps people. It's the emotional reward they get from being seen. Psychologists describe this as status signaling, using visible purchases to communicate wealth or success to others, often subconsciously. Social media has supercharged this instinct. People aren't just competing with their neighbors anymore. They're comparing themselves to curated highlight reels from thousands of strangers, most of whom are financing the very lifestyle being admired. It creates a strange, invisible arms race where everyone is performing wealth for an audience that is, quietly, doing the exact same thing back. The ninth sign is chasing feeling successful instead of becoming successful. There's a real difference between the two. Feeling successful is instant. A new purchase, a compliment, a like on a photo. Becoming successful is slow. A growing retirement account, a paid-off house, a widening gap between what you earn and what you spend. The dopamine hit from feeling successful is real, but it fades in hours. The security from becoming successful builds for decades. The tragedy is that chasing the first one often makes the second one impossible. And the 10th sign, maybe the most important one, is avoiding financial planning altogether. No budget, no clear numbers, no real look at where the money actually goes. Not because people are careless, but because facing the numbers honestly can feel frightening, especially if the picture doesn't match the image they've built. But avoidance doesn't make the numbers smaller. It just delays the moment they have to be faced, usually at a much higher cost. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all 10 of these signs. None of them are really about money. They're about identity. Advertising has spent a century teaching Americans that possessions equal worth, that visible success equals real success. But genuine wealth is almost always quieter than people expect. It's the neighbor with the modest house and the fully funded retirement account. It's the coworker in the 10-year-old car who never worries about a surprise expense. Real financial freedom doesn't need an audience. It doesn't perform. It just exists calmly in the background of someone's life. Marcus eventually found his way out of that cycle. Not through one dramatic decision, but through a series of small, unglamorous ones. Canceling the lease, paying off one card at a time, opening an account and automatically putting something into it every single month, even when it was uncomfortable. Nobody in the valet line ever knew the difference. But he did. And 2 years later, for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't performing wealth. He was building it. The next time you see someone who seems to have it all, the car, the clothes, the effortless lifestyle, remember that you're only seeing the parts they chose to show you. The real financial story is always the one nobody photographs. And the moment you stop trying to look rich is often the exact moment you start becoming it.